Alex, it's been a whirlwind of a week, and there was something special that happened this past week.
Yeah?
Tuesday was World Wildlife Day, and we did our part. That we didn't record or anything,
No.
but we did put out an Instagram post. I put out an Instagram post for us that said what the crew's favorite animals were.
Oh, yes.
And I asked our followers to guess whose is whose.
Yeah.
I should have made mention that there's three animals because there's three people in our crew.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's me and Alex, but there's additionally John. John is our editor. He does all our clips and everything like that.
Yeah.
But I guess we'll go over the results here.
Yeah, we had, it looked like we had one comment saying that Tyler's definitely a puffin guy.
Unfortunately, I am not the puffin guy. That is our editor, John.
Yes, sir.
Alex was the elk.
Yes. I had a hard choice. I don't necessarily have a favorite animal because I think they're all cool in their own ways, but I do enjoy the cervids because one, they taste good, and two, because like antlers are really cool,
Yeah.
like how they function, and that's definitely something when we eventually get to them, we'll get into that at length. But it is the fastest growing natural substance on the planet, to put it simply.
So that leaves one option left, and that was the three-toed sloth specifically.
Yeah.
And that was me. I have had an infatuation with sloth since the 12th grade.
A little younger than that, bud. A little earlier than that. That's when it probably peaked, I'd say.
That was the peak. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did a whole phylogenetic tree just on the sloths in 12th grade. But as always,
Nice.
I am your host Tyler, joined by my lovely co-host Alex. Welcome back to Life: The Complete Story. We're gonna through a little mix up here. We're gonna plug our socials first before we get into the news. Before we get into our news for the day. So make sure you guys like the page on Spotify at Life: The Complete Story. Subscribe to the page on YouTube at Life: The Complete Story. Follow us on Instagram at Life Complete Story, TikTok at Life Complete Story, and Facebook at Life: The Complete Story. And always, if you want, send us an email at lifecompletestory@gmail.com.
Yes, there's no the.
There is no the in the email. Correct.
Yes.
Send us video ideas, interesting facts,
Yeah.
clips, something like that. Things that you like that we haven't covered, and we'll try to get to it. But Alex, nature in the news, kicking off to you.
Yes, sir. So this week's Nature in the News comes to us from Michigan State University. So this is in Michigan, is one of the states of the United States, kind of the upper Midwest, right around the Great Lakes. But this article is titled "Study Raises the Possibility of a Country Without Butterflies." So this is not really a happy study, but it is a realistic study and something that's happening to a lot of different organisms, not just insects or butterflies specifically. But so in this, they did some, in this study, they brought together over 76,000 surveys across the entire continental U.S. So that is excluding Alaska and Hawaii. Continental U.S. is just the mainland United States. So the lower 48 is what we sometimes refer to them. And so I'm guessing this is probably in part of some citizen science as well as some studies that were done at different universities. And with this, the results found that between 2000 and 2020, the total butterfly abundance fell by about 22% in the 554 species that were counted.
Now, abundance is a scientific term, right? That is
like total population, like
right.
I believe. Like, I don't know if it's like an average population or if it's a like when they did these surveys, that would have been the tallies for the data would have been like every time they saw a different butterfly of that species, they would count that as one, and with each additional one they would see, they would add that to it, kind of as just a rolling tally as they count those different species. So in over those 20 years, they saw a 22% drop, which is, I mean, that's a lot. So the way they put it is that for every 5 individual butterflies within the contiguous United States in 2000, there were only 4 in 2020, which when you put it that way, doesn't seem like a lot, but when you extrapolate that out to like hundreds, that means
for every 1,000 butterflies, you're losing 200.
So like if there were 500 total butterflies in 2000, now there's 400. When you start expanding those numbers, you realize just how big of a problem that is. And it's is the one co-author of the paper, Elise Zipkin, who is a professor of quantitative ecology at Michigan State University. They said that to lose 22% of butterflies across the continental U.S. in just 2 decades is distressing. It shows a clear need for broad-scale conservation interventions. So, for those that don't know, butterflies are pretty major pollinators. So when we talked about them with the insects, the lepidopterans, and butterflies are only part of the lepidopterans. Moths are the other part. There are a lot of moths that are pollinators also, and they all fit their own specific niche. But what they do is they'll land on the flowers and they have a long kind of curled up proboscis, which is basically like a giant straw. And what they do is they stick that down into the flower to drink the nectar, which is like the sweet part of the flower. Inside the flower, it's like a sweet liquid, like a sugary liquid. And when they do that, as they contact the flower, they contact, I believe it is the stamen. Yes, the stamens, which is where the pollen is. That is the male sex cell of the flower. And then as they fly to different flowers, some of that pollen falls off and then contacts the female reproductive organ on that different flower. Now, a lot of flowers will have both, and they have specific like things that prevent self-pollination. Some plants do it and they're okay with it. Some aren't, and that's why they have that. And there are other species of plants that only have one sex or the other.
The dioecious ones.
Yeah, either the whole plant is either male or female, or different flowers on the plant are male or female. I know, like pine trees, their cones, like their different parts of the tree will have male or female cones. Typically, I believe the male cones are higher on the tree.
Yeah, and
they're much smaller.
Yeah, they're smaller and they open wider, I think, right?
I think the females open wider, but that's when they drop the seeds.
Irrelevant.
Getting off into the weeds. So it said another individual, one of the other co-authors, Nick Haddad, I believe I pronounced the name correctly, is an integrative biologist. He's a professor at MSU as well. And he said, speaking to some of his neighbors, that they'll just tell him, say, "Oh, I've been seeing fewer butterflies in my garden. Like, is this something that is this a problem?" And in the paper that the two scientists put together, they're working with a group of scientists with the USGS Powell Center for Analysis and Synthesis. So they got together those decades of butterfly data from 35 monitor programs that include records of over 12.6 million butterflies. They counted a lot of butterflies.
And for those who don't know, the USGS is the United States Geological Service.
Yes, but they do more than just geological
surveys. They do a lot of GIS and mapping and things of that nature.
Yeah. And so they were able to kind of track how those numbers changed over time in different areas, and they were able to track it regionally as well as across individual species, because for those that they had enough data for. And so they showed that the drop was about 1.3% annually across the country, except in the Pacific Northwest. While that it does come with a bit of it says here that result comes with a bit of a caveat, because it showed an apparent 10% increase in the Pacific Northwest over the 20-year study period. But that was largely due to one species of butterfly, the California tortoiseshell butterfly. The others, I think, showed either some stable or loss in population. Of course, butterflies are some of the most surveyed groups of insects because they're very easy to see. They have very distinctive coloration, and they're found all over the place. But because they are such vital pollinators, losing butterflies would be quite a problem.
Right. Anything else to add, Alex?
I'm sure it's just one other tidbit that they added in here. It said, like, butterflies are important and forgotten pollinators. People often think of bees first, but butterflies and regular flies as well, the dipterans, hemipterans.
Hymenopterans.
Now, Hymenoptera are bees.
Yeah.
True flies. Is it? Okay. They are responsible for for what they included here. It said it's responsible for about $120 million of cotton production in Texas, and that's just one example they use as far as the economic impact that losing butterflies would have. So it is a major concern, something that they are really looking for. Of course, they're contributing a good bit to overuse of insecticides in croplands, which about 20% of that cropland is suffering from lower underproductive yields, and that's mostly because while they're spraying for the pests that they don't want because they cause that loss in crop yield, unfortunately, a lot of times it will also affect the desirable insects like the bees, the butterflies, the flies that pollinate, and that becomes quite a problem because you start to see the loss in the desirable species as well. But that is all I have for our article today. It's just a pretty interesting one that popped up when I looked. Usually finding articles, I would pop into Science Daily and hit the environmental tab, and whatever first one kind of catches my eye. And this one seemed pretty cool. Something we've talked about the butterflies before, but
we gotta find a new positive one next week because
we'll
I feel like we're on a downward trend on our articles.
Yeah, we'll have to find a better one for next week. I know we've been talking a lot about global warming and just environmental problems as a whole.
But once again, this was a study performed by Michigan State University, or at least the materials were provided by Michigan State University, with a whole bunch of people involved in it.
Yes.
The list is humongous in the reference.
Yes.
I'm sure there was a lot of citizen biology going on, citizen science, using a lot of seek, iNaturalist type observations, things of that nature.
Yeah.
But that's going to do it for our Nature in the News. We'll move on into our lesson for the day.
Yes, sir.
Today's lesson is on the suborder Cobritoidae. These are the loaches. So last episode we talked about the suckers. We're moving on into the loaches today. They are named after the type genus described by Linnaeus in 1758 in the 10th edition of Systema Naturae, which is Linnaeus's whole taxonomic book on how everything gets labeled. Although the actual name Cobytus was originally derived from Aristotle, describing burying fish, or fish that bury in the sand and sediment, which is what these things do.
Yep. And here we have I pulled up a picture of a loach. It's just a generic one for now. We'll get a little more in depth as we get further along.
So, loaches, greatly morphologically, so there's big loaches, small loaches, wide loaches, fat loaches, skinny loaches, but they all kind of have the same general body shape, kind of elongated, spindle-shaped. And a lot of their similarities that kind of group them all in the same category is osteological, which is like in their bone structures.
Okay.
The smallest species of loach is only an inch long, while the largest species are up to 20 inches and can even weigh up to 6 pounds. As I said, most are that elongate, narrow body structure, while others are stouter, even like long eel-shaped, like more flattened latitudinally, like disc-shaped. They have 3 or more pairs of barbels at the mouth, kind of like how a catfish has barbels, but these are more not whisker-like, more like, I guess, beard-like. They're at the bottom of the mouth, and that
makes sense, being bottom dwellers if they're feeding on the subsurface of the.
And this is they don't have a wide mouth, or as wide of a mouth as a catfish. Their barbels don't have to be wide, like long, facing off the sides of their mouth, since they're pretty much like feeling for vibrations and then just sucking up whatever's underneath of them.
Okay.
They have cycloid scales underneath their skin, so they have they're smooth on the outside, but they do have a layer of scales underneath that skin. They're found in a variety of habitats, mostly within the Old World. So that would be like Europe, Asia, Africa. They are not found in Australia or or America, though.
Like North America, or
there's one or two species that are found in North America, but they're not prevalent.
Okay.
They've also kind of been introduced, so it's like kind of obsolete there. Yeah. Many of them burrow into sand, as I said. Some species still have adapted to life in caves. There's a specific term for that, but I forget what the term is.
Yeah, I don't remember it.
Moving on. I'll figure it out later. And a lot of them use them as a lot of people use it as a food fish, especially in like that Eastern Asia area, Thailand, Indonesia, southern China. And even still, some are very popular aquarium fish: tiger loach, striped loach, clown loach. Super cool stuff. Moving on, we'll move into our first order of loaches. This is going to be or class family of loaches. So we're going to go to Botidae. These are the point-faced loaches. These were in the grouping of true loaches before they became their own family in 2012. They're more robust than other loaches. They have an arched back with a more fusiform or spindle shape, and they have a pointed snout with a medium length. Alex, can you find a picture? Sweet. Perfect. Is that a striped loach?
It is it's in our first genera here. I believe it is
So it's Ambastia.
Yes, the Ambastia nigrolinate.
Awesome. As I said, most of the members have the pointed snout, hence why they're called the point-faced loaches, and they have they're kind of a medium length, typically about 12 inches. And within the family, there are 56 species in 8 genera. We'll just cover the genera for the day, since there's so many genera to talk about today. We're just going to cover the genera and not go deep into the species.
Yeah, I will try to pull up some pictures just to give you an idea of what they look like, at least.
So we have Ambastia, which is as pictured. These guys are found in Southeast Asia and China. There's 2 species within this group. The Indian next is Botia. These are the Indian loaches. One genus with around 20 species, until a paper was proposed in 2004 dividing it into 4 genera. So before it was one group with 20 species. Now it's split into 4 separate genera with a couple species each. So this specific genera, Botia, has 9 species in it. We'll get to later. They have razor sharp spines on their eye sockets. They typically lie flat, but when they get threatened, they kind of extend them as spines to ward off predators. When they feed, they produce a clicking sound. So that noise comes off their pharyngeal teeth when they're eating. And they have weird resting positions. So, like, typically when you think of a resting position for a fish, it just kind of floats, belly to the ground. These guys are kind of funky, and they'll, like, lay on their side, sometimes upside down. So, for, like, the unexperienced aquarist, you kind of think the fish is dead.
Yeah.
As I said, they have 9 species. Next is Chromobotia.
So before we move on for Botia, the picture I have here, that is Botia almorhe. It is the yo-yo loach. So
awesome.
So I just wanted to let the folks know what they were looking at.
Next is Chromobotia. This is a monotypic genera. That's a great picture. It's so small.
Yes.
This is the Tiger Botia, sole member of its genus. It originates in inland waters of Indonesia, specifically Borneo and Sumatra. First described in 1852, was put into the genus Botia before being separated into its own genera in 2004, as I said. Also known as the clown loach, similar size to the previous genera, about 12 inches, but more commonly in that 6 to 8 range. Next, we'll move on into Leptobotia. These guys are endemic to China, and there's 17 species. Alex, what have you pulled up for us today?
This one I pulled up here. It was the elongate loach, the first one on our list here, Leptobotia elongata. So these guys get a good bit larger, it seems.
Yeah, one of the larger species of loach that we've covered so far. Still around that 12-inch mark, but there's 17 total species in this genera, and a lot of these species don't have a lot to them. Just because I feel like doing research. I don't want to make assumptions, but I feel like doing research in China is kind of difficult. Just because there's so many hoops you have to jump through just to get there.
Okay.
On top of, I don't want to get into it. Next is Parabotia. These guys are found in China, but some other species are found in Japan, Vietnam, and Russia.
Picture. I believe this is the right one.
That looks like a loach.
Yeah, I believe that is the kissing loach.
Awesome.
Yes. Yes, Parabotia curtis.
Okay, we'll talk about that a little bit later on today. Next is the genera Cinebotia, found in Southeast China, Laos, Vietnam, and Thailand. There are 6 species, and I'm assuming you found a zebra loach.
I did, Cinebotia zebra.
Obviously, it gets that name up based off of its stripe pattern that it has. These guys are kind of smaller. This might be just a juvenile. I'm not sure. I don't really have access to citation of this picture, but probably fits that 4 to 6 inches mark.
Yeah.
Next is Syncrosis, the genera Syncrosis. These guys are Southeastern Asia. Again, very popular in the aquarium trade. There are 5 species, and I'm gonna let Alex tell us what he found.
We're doing Syncrosia, correct?
Yes,
So,
Syncrosis.
Okay. Yeah, so this should be Syncrosis bu40. It is the chameleon botia.
Awesome. Next is the genera, bear with me now, Yasu Hikotakia. These guys are found in the Mekong rivers, the Shaopira River, and the Mekong. So those are 2 different river systems. The Mekong and the Mekong are 2 different rivers. But there's 7 species in this genera. What you got there? Silver loach?
Sun loach.
Sun loach.
Yes. I know. It looked like there were, when I pulled up the pictures, looks like there's they must have 2 colorations. They're either this dark color or they're a very bright, almost orangey color. So that's probably where I would bet you it's like, if I had to guess, it's probably a male and female sort of thing.
Right.
The males are probably the
Some
brighter
sexual
colors.
dimorphism.
Yes, that'd be my guess. I don't know for certain.
But this more specifically is Yasu Hikotakia eos is the sun loach.
Correct.
We'll move on to the next family, Vilontela. These guys are the longfin loaches, small genus found in South. This is a monotypic genus, which is the only genus in this family. And they are 30 species. Maybe Alex can find a picture.
Yeah, trying to find a good picture for it. Here, zoom in in a moment. It's not.
That looks like a worm.
Yeah, it is a Violentella mossi.
Does it have a familiar name or just that?
That's just Violentella mossi.
Next up, we'll move into the family Cobitidae. This is the root family. These guys are the true loaches. There's a lot of genera in this grouping. So these guys are found mostly throughout Eurasia and even Morocco. They appear vermiform in appearance. That's worm-like. They lack true scales. They possess the mouth barbels that we talked about. And these guys are mostly scavengers. So first up is Acanthopsordes, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 species. That's a loach.
It is a loach. It should be Acanthopsordes gracilis, the first one on our list.
Gotcha.
But it was not specific on the picture.
Next up is Acanthopsis. These are the horse-faced loaches. These guys are found in sandy riverbeds throughout Southeast Asia, and there are 8 species to this as well.
This one I'm pulling up here should be Acanthopsis dialuzona. Once I get it zoomed in a little bit here, I apologize. There we go.
Yeah, I can see the horse face. I get it. I get the name.
Yeah.
So next we'll move on into Bibarba. So these guys are found in the Shengjiang River and the Hongshuhe River. So the type species Bibarba is a surface-dwelling species, while Bibarba parvoculus is troglobitic. That is the cave-dwelling species. Troglobitic. Okay. Word of the day. Well, not really the word of the day. We'll move into Canthophrys. Sole member of its genus is Canthophrys gongata, the gongata loach, found in South Asia. Look at that. How adorable.
Funky dude.
Cobitus has 97 recognized species. This is why we're not talking about species in, as a specific, because I don't feel like talking about 97 species.
Yeah, that's a lot. So,
these are the typical spiny loaches, so the most generic of the true loaches, I guess, is a good way to put it. And these guys are small freshwater fish in subtropical Eurasia. Next up, we'll move into Coreocobitus. These are Korean spiny loaches. 2 species involved in this genus. Alex, pull up a picture, hopefully, of Coreocobitus rotundicaudata.
Yup.
That is funky dude.
Yes, he's rather He's a bit rotund, I will say.
He is.
Although
Next
I think
is,
it's more the rotunda caudata. He's got that nice wide tail fin.
yeah, Cote latlimia has 3 species involved. I'm assuming I don't really have the information on this one, but I'm assuming South Asia and Eurasia. These guys are tiny.
They are very small. The one picture I found, I mean, it's the size of a couple fingers, like the length of it's only a couple fingers wide.
There's 3 species in this genus. Next is Lepidocephalichthys. I'm not good at my Latin, but I know ichthys is fish and cephal is head. I don't know what lepido means.
I'm not
I
a
know it's in
Latin.
the butterfly family,
Yes.
but I don't think it means butterfly head fish.
I would agree with you because you'll see when I pull up this picture.
That's not a butterfly head.
That is not Lepidocephalichthys heselti.
There's quite a handful of species in this genera. Looks say about 24. Based on my quick count, there's probably around 20-ish. I didn't feel like counting that quick. Next is Lepidocephalus. These are the spirit loaches. I can see why they get that name.
Yeah, they're very pale.
Very pale in color, almost like a ghost.
Yes.
Next is Microcobatus. One single species in this genera. I'm assuming these guys are small. Give or take.
Yeah, they're not tiny.
Probably 2 to 3 inches.
Yeah, a few inches long.
Next genera is Misgurnus. These are the weatherfish. I believe these are the ones that are also found in.
Yes, and when we get to our most wanted for today, I will go over that a little more.
Awesome.
But
Spoilers.
There you go. Spoilers, yes. There you go. There's Misgurnus fossilis, which is just
the
generic
weatherfish. Yep.
Yes, sir.
Next is Neoeucerichthys, single species, and Medeli, the Golpara loach, I believe.
There you go.
That's hard to see.
I know.
He's got some good camouflage.
He does have some fantastic camouflage.
Next is Pangeo. The type species for this is Pangea. Or Pangea.
Yes.
Okay.
Very worm-like, as many
very vermicular.
Yes. As many of our loaches are. They're very small. I would consider loaches a very bait fish sort of group.
Yes, I would too.
They tend to be relatively small, bottom-dwelling fish.
They're like the Eurasian equivalent to like a shad, at least in terms of like use.
Probably.
Obviously not in terms of like niche, because a shad's more like top water.
Yeah.
And a loach is obviously more of a bottom dweller.
God bless you.
Thank you. I thought I muted for that.
You did, but I saw that you muted. I said bless you.
Where we at? I lost my place now. We in Paralepidocephalus.
Yes. Words are hard.
That's ugly.
That is ugly. That's probably
That's a preserved specimen.
That is a preserved specimen. I couldn't find a living specimen for this
Next is Protocobatus. 3 species in this one. Alex is looking for a Protocobatus typhlops.
Yes. They are. This picture is similarly like preserved, but they are some of the. Here, I may have a better one here, but they are all this very pale coloration.
Oh.
Very, very pink.
Next genus, Sabanjuia. Alex is pulling up Sabanjuia balcanica.
Yes.
So, maybe this one lives in the Balkans.
So this one looks like many of our other loaches, just a very generic loach guy.
Got that spotted pattern on it to help it blend in with the sediment. We got Theriotis.
Trying to see, because there's a bunch of different pictures that are. This looks to be about my most. Wait, that seems to be about my best picture, I believe. Bingo. It is black and white, unfortunately, but all the pictures I'm seeing, they are that similar kind of dark, a very dark kind of a pale. Like the darker sections are more brownish, and the not so good pictures that I was finding.
Right. So then we have the family Barbucidae, which has the single genus Barbuca. I'm just kind of going to speed through these for now, so I won't really worry about pictures.
Okay.
Because we're at a half hour already, and we
are
still have 3 things to cover.
Yes. Yeah, and most of these all, while they have different coloration, they have very similar body forms and pretty similar niches as well. So
Right.
at this point, just to kind of give everyone an idea, they're all going to look relatively similar, as well as being fitting the same niche. You're going to differ in color and size, really. But we have a lot more to cover.
So lightning round go. Family Gastromyzontidae has the genus Anemia, Bashamyzon, Bufoidia, Ancaria, Eromyzon, Formosania, Gastromyzon, Glaniopsis, Hypergastromyzon, Catabasia, Labogastromyzon, Linepa homoloptera, Neogastromyzon, Paraprotomyzon, Parhomoloptera, Plesiomyzon, Protomyzon, Pseudogastromyzon, Sualia, Vanamania, Yaoshania. Those are all the genus in Gastromyzon today. And look, they look just like the other loaches.
Yes, they look very similar.
You didn't miss much, guys. The next family is Serpenticobidae. That looks a little bit different.
Yeah. They're a little bit more fish-like than eel-like.
These are single genus Serpenticobidis. The next family is Ballatoridae. Has Ballatora, Ballatoropsis, Balvania.
Yeah, these guys are a good bit different. These are more of your river loaches. They do look fairly different from the rest of our loaches.
They have wider. Oh, that's just to help them stay within, help them with the current.
Yeah,
and
here
stay
you go. I got
input.
a good picture to describe that. Being river loaches, they're faster currents. They use those fins to kind of help suction them to the sediment.
So these are, as I said, Bellatora, Ballatoropsis, Bavania, Cryptotora, Gatsa, Hemimyzon, Homoloptera, Homolopteroides, Homolopterula, Ginshaia, Leptorichthys, Meta Homoloptera, Neohomoloptera, Pseudohomoloptera, Cynogastromyzon, Travancoria. Our next family is Elopostomatidae. Back to the old loach.
Yep. Just very colorful.
And the last family, Nemachialidae, has Abrichthes, Acanthocobatus. That's a lot of loaches. Aphronemachilus, Barbatula claya, Draconectus, Dizohunia, Idinemychilus, Aeonemychilus, Hedonichthys, Homatula, Indoreonectus, Iscandaria, Capoasia, Carsten Senectus, Caiahischura, Lefua, Malachia, Mesonoemychilis, Micronemychili,
Macilius.
Yep, that one.
Yeah.
Mustera. Why can't they all be that easy?
Yeah. Nema Macilius.
Nemachilius, Nema Shilichthes, Neonomachilus, none.
Just N-U-N, none.
Oreonectus, Oxynoemechilus, Paraganthocobidus, and Paracobitus. Oh, there's more. Paranemachilus.
Yes, this one runs on like 2 pages.
Petruichthes, Physoschictura, Protonemachilus, Pteronemachilus, Ryacoschistera, Sassinidas, Schistera, Sectoria, Semimachilus, Speonectus, Phaeus
Spherophysa. That was a lot of, and those, and just for everyone listening, those were all the genus.
Yes.
So we'd have been here for months just trying to go through every single genus.
Let's put it
all
in
the species.
Perspective here. There's 1,200 species of loach.
Yes. So this one, as we said, and you can see in the picture here, this is all different loaches from just this family, Nemachilidae. So just to give you an idea, they're all fairly similar. They just occupy slightly different areas, slightly different
And just for a heads up, next week,
Yeah.
going to be the same way, because we're talking about carp, and almost every carp looks exactly the same.
There's a lot of carp, and they look very similar. There are some differences. Like a grass carp and an Asian carp are not, they look a little different, but they have very similar body styles.
Yeah. Let's just keep hammering it out. Alex, let's go to the Ecology Encyclopedia next.
Yes.
Because it's another doozy.
Correct.
So today we're going to be covering the geologic timescale.
Yes.
For today's episode. It's something we kind of cover every once in a while on here, but we never really have gone super in depth on it.
Correct. So, Tyler, while I pull this up, can you pull up when the mass extinctions were so we can plop those in as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in fact, I may even be able to find them with mass extinctions. I may be able to find it actually if you give me just a moment. There we go. Okay, I found one. Yes. So geologic time scale for everyone as we talk about this, these are the geologic time periods of the Earth. So when we're looking at different, like how long ago something was, like so it's broken up into the eons, eras, periods, and epochs. Now, most of the older periods are just periods, just one, because the amount of time, it's a lot harder to pinpoint like an epoch per se.
There's also no life. There's no citable life, I guess, because we don't really get multicellular life until the Cambrian explosion.
Correct.
So everything before then, you're just going off of rocks.
Yes.
And microbiota.
Correct. Yeah. So we go with about 4.6 billion years ago is what is general in the scientific community roughly considered the beginning of the Earth and then life on the Earth. So you see the Hadean eon is kind of the start of of the geologic time scale. And so you really don't see much life. If you do, it's single cells. And as you get into the Archean eon, that's where you start to see some more complex single cellular life, like the archaea, some bacteria. And then once you start getting to the Proterozoic eon, I think that's about the time you start seeing eukaryotic cellular life.
Yeah, there's a lot of eukaryotic life is branching at this point. There's also some geologic structures that have multicellular life at this point, but it's kind of
very simple.
It's very simple, and it's up in the air on why this exists, because as we have been over many, many times, nothing really comes around till the Cambrian explosion. So was this just nature's first attempt at life, and it kind of screwed up and was like, all right, we tried. We'll try again later.
Yeah, so it's that, or it's like just aggregated cells, like bacteria tend to aggregate in large colonies. So is it something like that? But once you hit the Cambrian, so if you look at the time period from the beginning of the Hadean at 4.6 billion years ago to the beginning of the Cambrian at 541 million years ago, I mean, it's 4 billion years until we start to see what we would consider our major multicellular life. There's a reason it's called the Cambrian explosion. This is the point when life has developed to where it was able to, the amount of diversity as well as complexity of life at this point quite literally exploded. This is where you start seeing major plant life, like you start seeing, and I think you start seeing a lot more terrestrial life as well at this point. Starting, of course, with plant life, and then getting into your animalistic life at this point is relatively small, especially on the terrestrial. It tends to be somewhat amphibious.
What is this?
At the beginning of the Cambrian explosion.
No.
No? Okay.
Cambrian explosion was mostly just marine.
Okay. No, I'm thinking closer to Carboniferous, I think is. Okay.
Because the Ordovician period is just fish.
Okay, well, I stand corrected.
In terms of, sorry, I don't mean to be a smart guy.
Oh no, you're fine. I had my timing off, and went so to back up. But you start seeing a lot of the complexity of life has vastly increased, and at this point, the Earth would have been much warmer. There'd have been a lot more ocean. And then and as we work through, Tyler said, you get to the Ordovician, the Silurian, and the Devonian, is when you start seeing a lot more fish as well as different arthropods. Arthropods tend to be fairly large, but they're still marine arthropods. Like I was saying, there were marine scorpions, which were very
Terrifying.
large. They were quite large, like the size, probably the size of like a large dog, if not bigger. At that point,
The
the
water
Marines,
scorpions?
yeah,
Terrifyingly, yeah, they're large.
yeah. So, but then as you get into the Carboniferous, so this is where you start seeing a lot of the terrestrial plants begin to evolve. I think they would have started more as like water edge plants that were getting above the water level, and then as they evolved to be kind of more tolerant of the drying, and then eventually just to be fully terrestrial. And this is when you see a lot of the start of your big plant life. You start seeing at this time you see a lot of ferns.
Yeah, a lot of bryophytes.
Your simpler plant life, but as complexity of life goes, it's becoming much more complex. And towards the end of the Carboniferous, I think, is when you start seeing more of your flower. I don't know if you're getting to your flowering plants yet, but you're seeing more of like your gymnosperms, I believe, towards the end of the Carboniferous.
It's most plant life was like horsetails,
Okay.
club mosses, so bryophytes and early gymnosperms.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if we're looking at in terms of a succession, this is like you said, your mosses, your ferns, your low-growing plant life, but then we're starting to get into our earlier gymnosperms. And then eventually, I think about the time of the Permian is when you really start seeing things like trees. And then I think flowering plants come about that time.
Yeah.
And when you look at the time frame, we have covered almost 250 million years between the beginning of the Cambrian until the beginning of the Permian.
Some of the things that were also going on this time, kind of been covering a lot of the plant life and stuff. In terms of like animal life, this is when we have the giant insects and other arthropods living on the earth because of how temperate, how humid and the warm it is, as well as like large carbon amounts that kind of help with that chitin shell. So there's like the age of the giant scorpions, giant millipedes, huge dragonflies. And in terms of like other animals like vertebrates, this is like the early sharks, what we talked the angel shark ancestors we talked about.
Okay. Are you starting to see at this point some of your amphibian and reptile ancestors?
Yeah, this is the early tetrapods are coming on.
Okay. Yeah, which are going to be your amphibians and your reptiles. And then as we get towards the and as you can see in the image here, we have a couple mass extinctions that you can see, and the one you see at the end of the Permian was almost wiped out life on Earth as it existed, because the vast majority of those like giant arthropods, because at this point the plant life hasn't started to really cool the Earth, but the oxygen concentration because of all the plants has now increased to a point that, as well as like the humidity, there's some environmental changes that are happening that no longer support these giant arthropods, and so many of them die, as well as you see a large die off of fish and things as well. Many of the tetrapods are able to survive. Now, of course, some of them did die in this extinction, but then as we get into the Mesozoic area, this is what most people think of as the age of the dinosaurs. This is really when the tetrapods start to kind of reign supreme on,
more specifically, sauropods.
Yes, and your reptilian ancestors. These are your reptilian and your avian ancestors. This is the point when they become like the masters of the earth. And now you're still seeing a lot of your plant life has become much larger and more complex. You're starting to see flowering plants, which is a major step in plant evolution as well. That kind of helps support the terrestrial life in a big way. And then as you move through the Mesozoic areas, as we said, this is the age of the dinosaurs, and about the Jurassic into the Cretaceous is where you start seeing mammal life begin to evolve. Now it starts out very small, like a lot of the rodent and like weasel, like very relatively small.
This isn't to say that mammals didn't exist beforehand. Synapsids are what branched the mammals. So synapsids started to form around the Triassic period. The Therapsid group kind of Donta gave rise to all mammals. Well, all living mammals right now.
Okay, yeah. And then as you get to the end of the Cretaceous, is your last considered the last mass extinction. Now, of course, there were smaller extinction events throughout this whole geologic time, but that's like your most recent mass extinction. That's when the vast majority of the dinosaurs died, and now the common theory on this is a major asteroid strike near the Yucatan Peninsula in Central America, like off the coast of Mexico, which kind of caused a cooling effect on the Earth, as well as it gave rise to because of the impact, gave rise to a lot of volcanic activity, releasing all of that volcanic ash into the air, causing a major cooling effect, which was very hard on those reptilian ancestors, but allowed the mammalian ancestors to thrive. And then this continued, and as you get into the Cenozoic area, this is now the age of the mammals, where you start to see all of our ancient mammals. You get eventually into like your megafauna, which is your woolly rhinos, mammoths, ground sloths, things of that nature. And then as you at this point, as we hit the beginning of the Cenozoic area, that is 66 million years ago. So from the beginning, I mean, we've covered almost 500 million years. That's an insane amount of time to put it into perspective. And then as you get now to the Quaternary period, and more specifically the Holocene epoch, is when you start to see human life. I think right around the Neogene to the Quaternary period is when the primates become more prevalent. Now, I don't know the exact evolutionary history there, but the Holocene, but I think around the Pleistocene to the Holocene is when you see a lot of the human ancestors, the genus Homo. That is where I think you see more of those, and then now into the Holocene is when you see Homo sapiens, which is modern humanity, which is you and I. But if you put this whole scale on a 24-hour clock, the Holocene epoch, specifically when humanity exists, is the last second of the 24th hour, 59th minute.
It's great.
So in relation to geologic time, we have been here for a blip of geologic time. Throughout this, and this is how we're tracking when we're talking about the phylogenetic tree and going through as we started with our very simple down to like our sponges and our corals, and then all the way up now that we're at fish. This is kind of where we're following that geologic time frame. Now, of course, like we said, the fish were pretty early on. They're very early of your
A very early
vertebrates.
branch of vertebrate, yeah.
Yes, the fish are the earliest vertebrates, which is why we're covering them first after the arthropods and our
other invertebrates.
Yes, the other invertebrates. That's why they are the first on the list. After, of course, the lamprey and the hagfish, because they showed that early notochord does not quite become the true spinal column yet. But those are your first ones to show like the bony skeletons, not just the cartilaginous skeletons like the sharks. So, kind of to give everyone an idea, when we're talking about our geologic time, especially as we're working with the fish, that Paleozoic era is where we're kind of starting with and then working down. Now, we are currently in the Cenozoic area. Quaternary period, Holocene epoch is where we exist currently. So that's about all I have. And it was kind of a long-winded,
That's okay.
There's a lot going on. I'd have to do more research to talk about some of the specifics, especially as the epochs, or you look in the Carboniferous, the Mississippian versus the Pennsylvanian sub-periods, what the differences there are. I don't know what that kind of big switch, or like what differentiates those two.
Yeah, we'll do some research. We can make a YouTube video on it or something.
That would require some more research from us. But so everyone watching and listening, you have an idea of when we talk about geologic time, this is what we're looking at here. Wanted to kind of talk, I know we touched on it before, but I wanted to get a bit more in depth as to what it looked like, why, especially when it comes to the extinctions, where we are at now. And that's Tyler and I read a book in college. There are some scientists who are hypothesizing that we are currently living through the 6th mass extinction.
Yeah, we did read this book. I was like, what are we talking about?
Yeah, because one, has been a very long time in geologic time since there's been a mass extinction, and just looking at, like we talked about today with the butterflies, and I don't know if we haven't quite we've touched on it in the past with the amphibians as we go through our amazing species. We're seeing a large die-off of quite a variety of organisms, and not just one group. It's across the board, so that's why many scientists are thinking we are in a 6th mass extinction right now. But that is all I have for this. I apologize for being a little long-winded, but wanted to make sure I explained it thoroughly, so everyone wasn't like, well, what are you talking about?
I'll let Alex catch his breath for a minute.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about our amazing species for the day. As I kind of hinted at earlier, we're talking about a loach. We're talking about the kissing loach. We talked about it a little bit earlier today. It's in that Parabodia genus, but this guy's critically endangered. Currently, less than 800 mature individuals in the wild. The IUCN has not mapped its population data, so no use in pulling up that map. But they do live in Japan, specifically in Honshu, Japan. They are critically endangered, assessed in 2015, published in 2015. However, see, this confuses me. Because in 1986, they were endangered up until 1994. And when they did the next assessment in 1996, they were data deficient. How do you just lose the data on what they are? But it only survives in 3 very small, isolated locations, which face a lot of ongoing and future threats. Their total extent of occurrence, EOO, is about 420 kilometers squared. Very, very small region. And there's some area of occupancy is only about 0.9 kilometers squared of that area. Or that's their actual area of occupancy. So that's constantly in decline. Just reading. Sorry.
Okay.
There's a lot of other problems include a road construction plan, which kind of increases the threat that they have on these 3 tiny isolated areas. The spawning conditions for the one subpopulation is heavily influenced by volunteer activity. So having people come in and help get everything ready for them to breed. So it's more like assisted breeding with human intervention. So it's kind of volunteer driven. There was a football stadium constructed right next to one of them. That sure helped. As well as, some introduced species like the largemouth bass and the great cormorant. But as I said, there's less than 800 mature individuals. They have about a 3-year generation. We're talking less than 10 years for it to go through a 3-generation length population change, which is what the general standard is in terms of IUCN testing, surveying, is they base it off of a 3-generation span. How much did the population declined in those 3 generations? Like I said, lots of threats, including housing in urban areas, overfishing, invasive species, logging, timber logging, dams and water management, as well as just general pollution. They are used in the pet trade nationally, so all through Japan, but it is prohibited in several laws. So it's more like a black market type fish. And we do have ex situ conservation. So that's taking it out of the area, putting it in a different area, and trying to bring the population up that way. But there is no protected area for it. That was my little speed run for the kissing loach. Parabotia curtis. Alex, if you'd like to go ahead and run through your most wanted.
Sir, so our most wanted for this week is also a loach, is one we talked about earlier. It is the weather loach, Misgurnus angulocaudatus. So if I can pull up a picture for you guys real quick, so that way, and while I'm doing that, I just wanted to talk real quick when we're going back to the geologic time scale, when we talked about the Permian extinction, that at the end of the Permian, I just looked it up real quick, that it killed 96% of all life. So just to give you an idea of how massive that extinction was, when I said it almost wiped out all of life, I was not lying. But getting to our weather loach, so these were first seen in Georgia. Is in North America. Does not say exactly when, unfortunately. I think the article I'm referencing.
The article was published in 2020.
Yes, so at least then. So these loaches, they've been shown that they can actually breathe air outside of the water, and they can grow to be about a foot long. So moderately sized fish, but that breathing air is a problem. And of course, they're popular in the pet trade and home aquariums, but they have found their way into the waterways, most likely from people dumping them. Like Tyler said, a lot of them, the way they'll lay is in some of the loaches, it'll seem like they're dead. So people release them and they survive. And then now they've been seen, this was the original study, they're doing a community assessment to find the Altamaha shiner in this small range. And as they were catching the fish, it looked like they were doing electrofishing, and as they did that in the bucket that they had the fish caught in, they realized that some of the fish, when they pulled out their species list, did not match any of the fish that were on that list. And so now this loach, it does pose a threat to a lot of native fish, especially like I said, the shiners. Some of those smaller bait fish is probably out competing many of them. Really doesn't have a lot of predators. Not really. I don't know if I would say it occupies the same niche, but they have relatively similar food, especially the weather loach being an omnivore. It competes with the native fish for those food sources, as well as it could also eat some of the eggs from those native fish. And for those small fish, the eggs are very small and a lot of time laying on the substrate or within the substrate, which is where the loaches love to be. They burrow into the substrate, so it makes it difficult to eradicate them, as well as makes it very easy for them to go after the native fish eggs. And so they don't really know if there'd be any benefit to introducing any sort of predatory fish that would eat the loaches, because it could also have harmful impacts on those ecosystems. So the best thing to do is don't release fish from your aquariums if you can't keep them anymore. Either give them away or just get rid of them.
Don't flush them.
Don't flush them. No, don't flush them. Don't dump them into the river. Best thing is to give them away. The second best thing, while a lot of people don't want to do that, would be just to eradicate them.
I gave my fish away one time.
Yeah.
His name was Steve. I gave it to Alex.
Yeah, you did. Steve did last a while.
Steve lasted like 2 years.
Yeah, it was just a little. It was a tetra, I believe.
It was a sad little beta fish, I thought. We had a tetra and we had betas.
Yeah, we had a couple. We had a few tetra, but they was in a small tank, and some of them lived for quite a while. But then that beta fish, that's Steve named for it. Steve Irwin, the late and oh so great Steve Irwin. He lasted for quite a while, and then, but unfortunately, he did not make it. And then I acquired Steve Jr. And Steve Jr. lasted a while as well. Unfortunately, I think trying to truck him back from between college and home a couple times was a little hard on him. Unfortunately, Steve Jr., as with all living things, eventually he found himself down the river as well.
Yeah. But anything else?
Not literally. That is all I have.
that's going to do it for us this week. Once again, make sure you follow us on our socials at Life Complete Story on Instagram and TikTok. Follow the page here on Spotify or YouTube, wherever you're watching, or both. It helps us out a lot. Send your emails to lifecompletestory@gmail.com if there's anything you want us to do, a video idea, podcast idea, new segments, things like that.
Yeah.
We're always looking for new things to do.
Yeah.
Let us know how we're doing.
I know my dad did mention the other day about something that we could talk about, and I cannot for the life of me remember what it is right now.
Have him send an email.
So I'll ask him next time I see him, which should be this weekend. So
yeah,
I'll ask, be like, hey, what was that thing again? I forgot.
And then he'll text me, and I'll be like, okay, cool.
Yeah. So it was actually a good topic. I just forgot what it was, unfortunately.
But we will see you all next week when we talk about carp.
Yes, sir.
Alex, how do we end the episode?
As we always end the episode, we want you all to keep on learning, learn something new. You never know what you'll find interesting. So thank you all for joining us for another episode of Life the Complete Story. We're glad you were here with us, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.